Hey everyone, it's Raj from 3CB Performance, back at it again with Laker Film Room, who's fresh off his Spectrum debut and the Athletic re-debut. Lakers big Anthony Davis has been dealing with right shoulder pain and discomfort since the Hornets game on October 27th, but continues to grit through it. In this video, I'll break down what may be injured, how the team is managing it, and what AD can do to avoid constant re-aggravation. To understand the possible injury, we first have to understand a little anatomy. The glenohumeral joint or shoulder joint is a quote ball and socket joint where the head of the humerus, the ball at the end of the upper arm bone, fits into the glenoid fossa or the shoulder socket of the scapula, shoulder blade. The glenoid is more like a plate than a socket and relies on the surrounding anatomy to provide stability. The anatomy we're focused on for AD is the labrum, a fibrocartilaginous ring that sits around the glenoid to create a suction effect, increase the depth of the socket, and absorb shock, and the rotator cuff, which is a collective term given to 4 different muscles that surround the joint and provide stability during movement. Whenever the shoulder moves, the head of the humerus, the ball, is actually gliding within the glenoid and changing its point of contact. For example, when AD puts his arm overhead to grab a board, the humeral head glides posteriorly backwards and slightly inferiorly downwards. This loose point of contact and gliding between the humeral head and glenoid is what makes the glenohumeral shoulder joint the most mobile joint in the body. That's also why the labrum and rotator cuff are so important functionally. AD's injury occurred early in the third quarter against the Hornets when he went up to dunk the ball but caught front rim. Let's break down the sequence a little closer. When he's attempting the dunk, his right shoulder is at full stretch in a flexed, adducted, and internally rotated position. This means two things. Firstly, in this position, the head of his right humerus is shifted backwards within the glenoid, shoulder socket, and secondly, it puts some of his rotator cuff musculature in a disadvantageous position, which inhibits their stabilizing function. He's gripping tightly onto the ball, which increases activation of the rotator cuff musculature, known as the quote irradiation effect. This effect is why shoulder pain through a certain range of motion can often be decreased simply by clenching your fist as you're doing it, because it increases activation of the stabilizing rotator cuff muscles. When AD hits front rim, it creates a sudden jolt, a quote radial force, that pushes his humeral head farther backwards and puts a third and sudden stress on his rotator cuff. Due to that sudden force, my educated guess is that his humeral head shifted posteriorly backwards and ran into the labrum, resulting in a mild to moderate tear in the posterior labrum. Additionally, his rotator cuff musculature may have taken some strain, but I believe that's likely secondary to the labrum. The labral issue matches up with how AD has re-aggravated the shoulder during end range overhead movements, which push the humeral head backwards into that posterior labrum, how he's described the injury as being more painful at first and decreasing over time, and lastly, his description of the injury during and after games.
Do everything. I don't think about it when I'm playing. You know, it's the thing after the play. Like say after a block shot, I was like, oh, I feel it, but as I go back playing this, playing off adrenaline, so I don't really, think about it much. What is after games is hard, when you kind of cool down.
The management of a posterior labral tear really depends on severity and symptoms. For moderate tears, surgery can be indicated if the patient has ongoing pain, soreness, and feelings of instability in the shoulder. Even if surgery is indicated, we've seen multiple examples of NBA players who've been able to manage it during the season and then did it addressed during the summer. Notably, Kobe had a quote significant labral tear in 2003 and had surgery done after the season. AD himself had a labral tear in his left shoulder and played through it for 3 seasons. Obviously, AD and the Lakers medical staff are currently managing the injury and plan to do so going forward. That consists of a few things: hands-on and modality-based treatment to reduce pain, particularly in shoulder and shoulder blade muscles that are constantly activated and guarding that injured area. Additionally, you can utilize hands-on techniques to maintain mobility in the posterior shoulder capsule, which is prone to tightening up and narrowing down space in the shoulder joint. Ongoing strengthening of the rotator cuff muscles, deltoids, scapular, shoulder blade muscles, and surrounding musculature to optimize control of the glenohumeral joint, alleviate stress off the joint, and guard against muscular imbalances. In addition to strengthening, the team has been taping AD's shoulder, very likely to add reinforced stability and keep the humeral head from shifting too far backwards and irritating the labrum. I've mentioned risk-reward in every AD video I've made, and it applies once again. AD's physical attributes, such as his 7'6" wingspan and relentless motor, are what make him an incredibly unique and devastating player. However, those attributes can also be a double-edged sword. The length of his arm creates a huge mechanical lever that generates a high amount of force on his shoulder joint. Additionally, his relentless pursuit of every loose ball, rebound, block, etc. often puts him into positions where his shoulder is overhead in full flexion and end range. This creates a situation where AD can re-aggravate the injury on plays that simply aren't worth the reward, like getting that loose rebound in a regular season game in the second quarter. It's extremely hard to change that hustle mentality, and you'd much rather a player have it than not, especially a superstar, but it can lead to unnecessary risk. Obviously, no shoulder injury to AD is ideal, but this is manageable when done, as Coach Vogel put it, quote, intelligently, and the medical staff will continue to treat on a daily basis and monitor AD's discomfort level to determine his availability and take games off as needed, like he did versus the Warriors. Situations like this are why the team went out and got Judy Seto, who has a ton of experience managing issues during the season from her extensive time as Kobe's lead therapist. That's a wrap for this video. Thanks for watching. My goal is to provide you with in-depth, evidence-based, narrative-free analysis. You can always find me on IG and Twitter at 3CB Performance, along with my own YouTube channel where I deep dive into player injuries of all shapes and sizes. Make sure to sub to that channel along with subbing to this one and following LFR on all social media. 3CB out.